November 5th. Remember, we haven't had a meeting in a while, so we might be a little herky-jerky today. For those that have not had the pleasure of attending one of our meetings before, a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, if you could silence your cell phones, it would make things a little quieter and allow us to focus on our work. Second of all, the way things work is once we're done with the roll call and have approved the minutes, we go over each item one at a time. First, city staff presents on an item, then it's open just to the commission for technical questions. Once technical questions are over, we open up the floor for public comment. If you have a comment or a question, we ask you to step up to the microphone and state your name and address so we have it for the record. And please try to keep your comments on point and concise if you can. With that, Mina, let us call.
Kathleen Propp.
Here.
Mamadou Koulibaly.
Here.
Lindsay Erickson. Michael Ford.
Here.
John Hinn.
Present.
John Kiefer. Lori Palmieri.
Here.
Thomas Perry.
Here.
Justin Mitchell.
Here.
Eric Gross.
Here.
Thomas Forte.
Here. Moving on to the approval of the minutes from October 1st. I know it was a long time ago, but do we have any changes, deletions, additions, or corrections?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Moving on to item number 1. Public hearing, zone change from institutional district to institutional plan development, IPD district for property located at 1745 Oregon Street. Have we had any site inspections for that one? Okay, we have several.
I live around the corner.
All right, so you inspect it every day?
Yes.
From your window on the second floor? We accept the staff report as part of the record. On to y'all.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, this is a.
Now it's working.
Working?
Time out.
All right.
Time out.
We're good.
All right. So this is a rezone request for the former Smith School site. It's located in the intersection of Oregon Street and West 18th Ave, and also has frontage on Arizona Street. The surrounding area is mostly single-family uses, as well as a few commercial uses to the north along the corner of Oregon Street and West 17th Avenue. The 2040 comprehensive plan recommends a community facility land use for the subject property. So here's an aerial view of the subject site. So here's the former school building and associated playground areas. So the city is requesting to rezone these sites from institutional to institutional with a plan development overlay. And this plan development overlay would allow for accommodation of future reuse of the site. The Oshkosh Area School District has submitted or sent out a request for proposal for the former school site. And again, so that rezoning to have the plan development overlay would help to expedite the redevelopment of the site. Additionally, since it is in a residential area, it is appropriate to have the site rezoned to have the plan development overlay to allow for further review of future land use proposals. And with that, staff recommends approval of the zone change from institutional district to institutional district with a plan development overlay at 1745 Oregon Street, as requested.
Thank you. Technical questions from the commission. Go ahead, Kath.
Well, I saw on the news that the school district had in fact received 2 proposals, and I think they rejected both proposals, but both of them were going to be apartments, I believe. Is institutional zoning going to be appropriate for
That's
that?
one of the reasons we're looking at the plan development overlay. We know reuse of this building is going to be somewhat challenging. By putting the plan development overlay in place, it gives us the tools needed to redevelopment, whether it be
Well, I get
some
the
sort
plan,
of apartment.
I get the plan development. I think that's great, but I'm talking about the
The
underlying
PD
zoning,
gives-
the institutional zoning.
Institutional with a plan development overlay does give the ability for apartments.
Okay.
It's similar to Cabrini School that we'll be talking about later today. That's going through a similar process of rezoning to IPD for residential land uses.
Okay, thank you.
Other technical questions? Okay. Seeing none, anyone here from the public to speak to this item today? Going once? Twice? Okay, back to the commission.
I'll make a motion to adopt the findings and recommendation as stated in the staff report.
Second.
All right. Discussion. One way to get through items quickly. Seeing none, call the roll.
Perry.
Aye.
Mitchell.
Aye.
Gross.
Aye.
Propp.
Aye.
Koulibaly.
Aye.
Ford.
Aye.
Hintz.
Aye.
Palmieri.
Aye.
Forte.
Aye.
Motion carried 9-0.
On to item number 2, a specific implementation plan amendment for a new building for an express lube facility at 355 North Washburn Street. Do we have any site inspections out there? All right, we accept the staff report as part of the record. Your turn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So item 2 is for a specific implementation plan amendment for Bergstrom's facility at 355 North Washburn Street. You can see the subject site there outlined. So it's a pretty deep lot. To the immediate east of the site are North Washburn Street and Interstate 41. So that kind of forms a barrier there between the site and any land uses to the east. To the west are some single and two-family residential properties, a little bit less intense land use there. And then to the north and south are a mixture of commercial uses there. In 2005, the Common Council approved a plan development for an auto dealership at this site. That plan development addressed landscaping, fencing, I think detention areas, and lighting. It allowed for this approximately 34,000 square foot dealership and associated service area and showroom. It also allowed for customer parking, service parking back here. I'll kind of explain that a little bit. And then vehicle display areas outdoors, as is obviously the case at all dealerships in town here. For this one, we'll kind of focus on the rear or the west portion of the site. This just shows an aerial of the site here, just kind of showing you a little bit better. Here's the eagle view. It's a little hard to see, but you can kind of see the massing of the existing dealership, the site being separated into east and west portions. A lot of the customer interactions are confined, I think, to this portion of the site. And then the service and then extra vehicle inventory is stored back here. Service, parking, et cetera, back there also. Just a street view, Washburn Street looking north. You can see the interstate here, and then the vehicle display areas for this Chevrolet Cadillac dealership here. And then looking south, kind of similar. Some of the landscaping, obviously, to the front there, kind of separating between the street and those vehicle display areas. This is their site plan. So what they are looking to do is pretty minor, I believe. They're looking to add a express lube facility here, about 2,300 square feet of building area. So a separate building to expand the use of this dealership, and this would serve the dealership and their customers. So just be an express lube facility in the rear of the main dealership. They would be removing a number of parking stalls in the back there on the western portion of the site. As I mentioned before, a lot of their service and employee parking spaces are in the rear, so it would not be affecting any customer access to the site. No driveway access would change. None of the parking up front would change. The customer parking is confined to the front portion of the site. None of these new car spaces would change. I believe some of the parking to be reduced would not have a major impact on the site. There might be some internal circulation things that they have to work out, but that's an internal issue for the applicant and for the owner to figure out. They are already way overparked, as I showed in your staff reports. They're well over the code minimum. The main thing that they're going to be impacting is they're going to be removing one light pole that exists on the site. And what they would do is they'd place this building and they'd have a number of wall packs. Each facade of this building would have at least one wall pack on that structure there. They are looking from a material standpoint to match and be consistent with the existing dealership. So we as staff felt that that was in keeping with the intent of the ordinance. We felt that we could support that. We did discuss some potential foundation landscaping on the south side of the building, but after discussing with the applicant the fact that this is internal to the site and it is a pretty narrow access drive, a service drive that they have internal to the site back here, and looking at the fact that it is removed from the main customer areas, we felt that that would not add much value to the site. So the main concern we had when we wrote the staff report was that they were not in compliance at the time with the maximum lighting trespass at the south property line. You're allowed 0.5 foot candles. They, at the time, they exceeded that. They have addressed that, and they have submitted an updated photometric plan. So we believe that that was the main thing we had to worry about as staff. You can see the elevations here. Nothing particularly spectacular, but at the same time, it does meet or does match the existing dealership. So it isn't like it's a step down from the dealership as far as material use. You can see the bays of this structure, pretty utilitarian, and it's just going to be serving this site. It's not going to have major impacts visually because it's located behind the main dealership. We would recommend approval of this SIP amendment. And this condition, actually, they have complied with this. They did, as I mentioned, submit an updated photometric plan. We were not going to require them to come into compliance for the rest of the site since they're not adjusting anything or revising anything on the site.
All right, thank you, sir. Technical question? Justin?
You can go back to the elevation image.
Sure.
What is on the lower left image, what is the stuff on the right side of that building? Is that like mechanicals?
I thought they had like an oil, a waste oil. Right here, this is for waste oil, I believe.
Okay.
Yep. So kind of service for that building itself.
Other technical questions? Okay, seeing none, anyone here from the public to speak to this item today? All right. Okay, back to the commission.
Motion to adopt the findings and recommendations as stated in the staff report.
Second?
Okay, discussion, anything? Go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, so if you could maybe go to the aerial photo map that you had.
Sure.
Um,
That one?
One
Or
more.
Maybe the other one that's
further
a
back.
little easier to see, yep.
So look at that, and this is an intentional built environment that we have, and it really just looks like a large concrete and asphalt slab with very, very minimal improvements or value in terms of the environment in which people are working and living and customers are visiting. I take slight issue with a note in the document here where it says that landscaping isn't required because it's not visible from the street. In other words, I mean, I think that we have an interest in having an environmentally friendly, an attractive setting, regardless of if it's visible from the highway or not. People are working there. People are going to be going through the drive-through, whatnot. I understand there's limitations, given that this is a drive-through lube, if you will, and people are going to be coming in on one side and going out the other. But you have waste oil receptacles. That whole area could easily have some trees that would help to break a large concrete slab. That if you just look at it, it's one of the things that we're doing is trying to intentionally create valuable environmental and life areas that improve our life, and I think that several trees can help to improve that. The same reason why we go to a well-manicured golf course or a park or hunting in the woods is trees add value to our life, and I don't see why we wouldn't pursue that, given that everything else is just concrete and asphalt there.
So typically in these situations, the way staff reviews them are what is required first, and then if base standard modifications are being requested, what is a reasonable ask to offset those requests? In this case, there's none required, which would be the first thing, and they're not asking for any base standard modifications. So staff looks at what is our justification for requiring it. If they push back on it, what can we look at in the ordinance that says you must do this? In this case, there's nothing really in there. Now, it's a plan development, which has some leeway through this body that they can choose to add those. When staff reviewed it, there's nothing we can hang our hat on that we can specifically say, here is why we feel you should be doing this additional.
I guess,
Go ahead, Laura.
in relation to that statement, on page 4 of the staff report, in the findings and recommendations that were referenced, number I, it says that the proposed plan development project will produce significant benefits in terms of environmental design and significant alternative approaches to addressing development performance. And I realized that this was something that the council found previously, but I
That
think
could
it
easily be
speaks.
removed from a findings in this case. As kind of previously enumerated, we look to the actual ordinance requirements, and in this case, there weren't any for us to use to require it. Like I said, it is a plan development, so these are things Plan Commission can consider, especially as you pointed out to is number I. So Plan Commission has that purview to say, you know what, in this case, we really feel in this setting it's an appropriate addition.
Well,
It may not be a code requirement, but we think it helps.
Well, and I bring that up too because recently I was at the airport and the director was referencing some of the stormwater issues that they face that may or may not be attributed to coming from Outlet Mall and this kind of strip area going across because they experience some issues over there. So that's why
Yeah, Stringham, I know Justin's in the back, but Stringham Creek watershed in general, as you move east across the highway, has some issues
So-
near the airport.
Does this contribute to the Stringham Creek?
Is this part of Stringham Creek, Justin? Would this be part of that area? This is separate? This is too far north. So I wouldn't imagine this area would not be impacting like anything near the airport. Separate watershed.
Other questions, thoughts? John?
Just really quickly, if they were to repave this back section back here, would we be then requiring them to?
So at a full-
Because of resurfacing?
Correct. If a full reconstruct of the parking lot were to take place, so if this parking lot failed, it would have to be brought up to today's standards for stormwater management, landscaping, islands, curbing, all of those things. A mill and overlay resurfacing as outlined in our code does not require those things, but a full reconstruct does.
All right. Other thoughts, questions?
Am I able to make a motion then as a recommendation?
Yep, that's within this body's purview.
All right, so if possible, then I would just like to make a motion to add the following, that the owner work with the city to incorporate green space section around the building as able, considering the traffic flow, including arborvitae type trees.
I would look for a little more specific of what you want than that, because if staff's gonna have to then in turn enforce this.
Well, again, without seeing the specifics of a traffic flow pattern, obviously you can't put something in the traffic flow, but
We do have a number of like land, so generally when we do this, we quantify with a number of points.
and I guess I'm not an expert on your whole point system to date,
We
but
have the code.
in general, you have that area where they have a waste receptacle area.
So are you thinking, and this is why I want to nail down a little further, trees, shrubs, because we can start to accentuate point values with those. Trees, anywhere from usually get 33 to 50 points. Shrubs can be 3 to 5 points apiece. So, and that's just why I ask. I want to make sure if this body passes, the council passes, it's something staff understands what you want.
Yeah.
Make sure we meet the.
Does this body typically, Kathy, you've been on this for a while, do you typically recommend a point system or a general concept?
No, the staff recommends the point system.
Right, I don't know what your point system would be.
And that's why I ask, are you thinking more of foundation type landscaping, trees?
Like blocking?
Or some
Blocking?
pervious pavement?
Yeah,
Tom?
Could we say something to the fact of we would ask for landscaping points commensurate with the size of the building if it were a standalone?
Like a new development?
Yeah, I'm just trying to, I want to make sure we can enforce what you guys want, so I want to make sure I have a clear understanding of it. So for a building, how large is this building, Stephen?
It's like 2,300 square feet. I forget the linear footage of it.
Talking about the whole building or just the piece that has? the
Say
piece
we looked at foundation landscaping requirements, just to give us an example. That we require 40 points per 100 feet of building foundation. Is the architect here for this? We may be able to bring them up and ask what the linear feet of building is. Maybe we can get to equate. That may attribute it to say 100 points, which could be approximately 20 shrubs. just to give you an example. Would that be sufficient what you're looking for, or are you thinking more?
No, it's a minimal, something.
66 by 30, so about 200, give or take. So 200 linear feet of building would be about 80 points, if we just, using some rough math.
Right.
I think that would be a reasonable ask, and then we can work with them on saying, all right, if you want to do a couple of trees, a couple of bushes, work through to get to a similar number to that.
Right.
Okay, I just want to make sure I have a clear understanding so we can,
So then you're saying how many points again?
are you comfortable with 80?
80.
All right. Do we have a second
Second.
discussion? Yeah?
You're talking about, you're hoping to do this around the new building,
Right.
the new Lou building. Well, I see a lot of issues with that because I can see their ingress and egress, and there's no room on the long side of the building. You've got the bays, people going in one way and out the other. You've got the waste oil thing on the other side, and then you've got it positioned right on the traffic way.
And that's,
Driveway.
yeah, we had discussed the southern end for landscaping, and I think we were gonna require like 40 points there along that south side, but the applicant came back and said, well, I think it's only like, 16 feet in width here for this access drive, so.
Okay, well, then they would have
Yep.
to move their
Shift the whole
Lou
thing
building,
north.
north a little bit, if this passes
Yep.
and goes through the,
And I know he had mentioned too with that, they wanted to have a straight shot from these bays of the original dealership straight
Oh,
into
okay,
this.
okay.
So that was,
Something I, for clarification, when the developer comes up, I believe this is all still gated, that this is, customers would not be bringing their vehicles back here directly. The dealership would be bringing them back, which I think is why they wanted that lineup, but we
Yep.
can,
Kathy, so what I was looking at was on the north side where you have a waste receptacle area. Simply, two trees,
Round.
two arborvitae trees fills
Around
that requirement, and I don't see that to be imposing much or
So that wouldn't be 80
difficult.
points.
It would be, he said 40 a tree.
depending upon the type of tree, I was just giving rough examples.
okay, well, then, I still have the floor, I think.
Yep.
My comment is, I'm sympathetic to what you want to do, but I don't like the fact that the ordinance really doesn't allow us to do this. I'm not sure we have grounds on which we could do this if they pushed back. So I probably won't be supporting the amendment much as I'm sympathetic with the thought.
Other thoughts, John? And then Michael?
Yeah, I just kind of want to echo what Kathy is saying. Not that I don't think that we should, or that there should be more landscaping in the city, because yes, there should be. But we already have a name as a place that's hard to work with, to develop in, and to suddenly start throwing things on that aren't in our ordinances, that's just further enhancing that vision that they, whether it's true or not, they're gonna say, look what they did here. They just decided that they were gonna make them throw a bunch of trees in where it's not part of the ordinance. What are they gonna do to us when we come in? Again, we need to be consistent, and that's one of the things I think we've really done as a plan commission over the years, at least since I've been here, is we've been very consistent, trying to follow the ordinances, trying to follow what's intended by the ordinances, and that's why in this one, I'm with you on this, Kathy. I don't think it's the right place or the right time.
So, question for you, because these two have both said that it's not in the ordinance, so it's not required. And I felt you were kind of gray with your description. I'm reading this, and there's a whole section on landscaping, and there's nowhere in here do you say you don't require it because you can't. You simply have in here, it doesn't really make sense because of this or that, they can't see from the road, which
So-
would mean that you're giving a discussion. We would require it, however, it's not visible from the
So
road, so
what
we're not
that's
going to.
referencing is the fact that it's a plan development. When we looked at the base code does not require it, period, black and white. Anytime it's a plan development, the city is given the option of evaluating it. And that's what that is referencing. We evaluate it as staff, and we don't think there's anything that's in here that necessitates asking. And it's usually, like I said, related to base standard verifications. Someone makes an ask, we offset it. In this case, there is no base standard, so there is no necessarily, in staff's opinion, justification for the ask.
So if this would have been, if this building, let's say, was going to be right along the highway on the front,
Then foundation landscaping and some of our street fronting landscaping requirements would kick in.
so just so I understand, there's ordinance requirements that if it's visible from a street, it's required. If it's not visible from a street, it's not required.
Correct. Some of our foundation landscaping requirements, for example, and our street frontage plantings are related to proximity to the street. Same with like our exterior requirements for building materials are related to visibility from the street.
Mike, you had your hand.
Yeah, Stephen, you mentioned that you had looked at this prior with the applicant?
We did, yep. Particularly for the south side of the building. Yep.
Okay. I guess what was the genesis of that? I mean, what was if there was no reason to do it, what was the rationale? Just
Staff wanted to evaluate the impact to the south and
Yeah.
the proximity and the ability to fit landscaping on the south side of that building.
Yep.
So that was the first place we thought, well, if landscaping was going to be added to this site, where would it make the most sense? Because generally landscaping, the intent of landscaping is to mitigate its impact on a neighbor. That's generally the intent of landscaping. Mr. Mitchell's correct. We then start to add in some of those yard landscaping points to beautify a site, change the environmental impact. But the first and foremost point of having landscaping is your impact on your neighbors. How can we soften that look? Looking at the site, we didn't feel we were gaining any value landscaping the south side of that building. And with the fact that there was no justification and ask, we really couldn't justify forcing them to do it.
okay. Okay. I mean, you would have asked without justification? I guess
That's
where
where
I'm confused.
we started thinking if we
Yeah.
were going to go down this path,
Okay.
and we quickly came to realize there isn't.
Being
First,
proactive.
first glance as well. What if we add landscape to the south?
Okay.
And then we looked a little closer and said, well, really, we don't have the justification to even ask for that.
Thank you for clarifying the process.
Go ahead, Mike.
Just a follow-up question then. So since the Stormwater Management Department of Public Works reviews that in the site plan, is there a case whereby it says any stormwater requirements can be addressed during site plan review that bioswales or other?
I'll let Justin weigh in a little. In this case, it's an impervious to impervious change, so their stormwater requirements are likely going to be very minimal. We're not removing green space and adding additional impervious.
What was the exact question again?
Oh, just with the stormwater management piece of this, that Department of Public Works would review it during the site plan, and that any stormwater requirements can be addressed during site plan review. And I guess the question would be, with this type of change to the SIP, would there be any type of bioswales or other, I guess, stormwater mitigation that would lend itself to something along the lines of environmental considerations?
In this specific project, the applicant will be removing street or parking or drive aisles and adding a building to it. Under Chapter 14, the requirements would be them needing to retreat the streets or parking and drive aisles, not rooftops, under reconstruction. So there would be very minimal requirements, not necessarily even bioswales or filters, anything like that for this project.
Thank you.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. There's been a second, and we've discussed it. Shall we vote? Call the roll. This is for Justin's amendment.
Okay. Perry?
Aye.
Mitchell?
Aye.
Gross?
Aye.
Crop?
No?
Kulabali?
Aye.
Ford?
Nope.
Hintz?
No.
Palmieri?
Aye.
Wojtek?
No?
All right.
5-4.
Motion carried 5-4.
All right,
So
so,
we're not done yet.
nope, this is just they haven't passed the, yeah, get comfy.
We have to vote on the main motion.
Now we have to have on the main, is there further discussion on the main motion? Then we take a vote. Now, if we vote affirmatively, then we're including.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there would be two conditions placed on this.
Right.
First, that the petitioner submit an updated photometric plan. They've already complied with that, but I'd like to keep it on there just for consistency. Second condition would be to work with staff to provide 80 points of landscaping around the new structure. So make sure I have that worded, or probably we can wordsmith a little bit so it's cleaner, but that's the gist of what you want.
On the north side.
All right, Mina, take it away.
All right. Perry?
Aye.
Mitchell?
Aye.
Gross?
Aye.
Crop?
Aye.
Kulabali?
Aye.
Ford?
Aye.
Hintz?
Aye.
Palmieri?
Aye.
Wojtek?
Aye.
Motion carried 9-0.
All right. On to item number 3, public hearing zone change from institutional district to institutional district with plan development overlay, general development plan, and specific implementation plan approval for an adaptive reuse of a former school to a senior living apartment located at 619 Merritt Avenue. Any site inspections? We have several today, all right. Accept the staff report as part of the record, and on to you, Jeff.
Thank you. This is a zone change request and a GDP and SIP approval for the St. Mary's Congregational Church and the former St. Francis Cabrini School located at 619 Merritt Avenue. Up on the screen, I have the subject site on the screen. The current zone district for the site is I Institutional District, and the first request of this is to add a plan development overlay to the site, and I'll get into that in a few minutes. The subject site consists of two parcels encompassing approximately 2.65 acres, and the site is bounded by 3 streets, Merritt Avenue on the north, Monroe on the west, and Boyd Street on the east. The main parcel contains the St. Mary's Church right here on the west side, and the Cabrini Elementary School on the east side. And then the site does have a number of other accessory structures, including parking, service walks, and a garage. Whoops, I'll go back here. The general area is a mix of mostly lower density residential, of a couple 2 families scattered throughout, and a couple of commercial and mixed use properties. And to the north, there's an apartment complex that's owned by the Oshkosh Housing Authority. And here's a 2018 aerial photo showing the site. Again, the church here on the west and the school on the right side. The church does have this is a parsonage house that is connected to the church building. Currently, overall, the site is covered by approximately 83.2% of impervious surface and 16.8% green space. The applicant is proposing to split the property in 2. I should mention the second parcel is this little one down here, which served as a playground area for students of the school. But the petitioner, here's a site plan of the proposed plan development request. The first request is they're looking to split the parcel in 2, pretty much from north to south. The proposed lot line more or less hugs the west building foundation of the school property. And then this small lot over here would be combined with the church property. Now, the land division will require a certified survey map, which has not been submitted at this time. The proposed lot line will require a base standard modification due to the proximity of the new lot line to the school. They're proposing a 0-foot setback, where in the institutional district, a 7.5-foot side yard setback is required. Staff is supportive of that base standard modification due to the existing conditions of the school. Parking goes right up to the building, and in our opinion, it's the most logical area to place line if they want to separate the 2 uses from one another. Getting back to the zone change, the applicant is requesting to add a planned development overlay district to both properties. The plan development overlay will allow for I mentioned the base standard modification requirement. The PD overlay allows the Common Council to grant these base standard modifications, and staff, we understand the uniqueness of the site with existing conditions, so staff is supportive of adding the plan development overlay to the site. The applicant is proposing an adaptive reuse for the former school building, which has been vacant for a couple of years now. The applicant's proposing to introduce senior living apartments to the site. Per the narrative, 35 units are planned to be constructed within the former school. Staff is supportive of that adaptive reuse. Buildings of this type, once they're once they outlive their original intended use, are hard to redevelop with a new appropriate use. However, multifamily uses are not permitted within the institutional zone district, so again, another base standard modification will be required for the base for the proposed apartment use on this, within the school building. Another option was to rezone just the eastern half of the property, but that could be viewed as a spot zoning, which is a poor planning practice. And if for whatever reason, if this development would not move forward, and it's pretty much no harm or no foul, the school would still be, permitted use by right within the institutional zone district. Staff is in support of the proposed reuse to apartments. The apartments should not have a detrimental impact on the neighborhood. Again, this area has a wide variety of different types of residential uses, including a similar multifamily use just to the north. Another site change or use change is the applicant is proposing to raise this garage structure from the site in its place to, I'm going to go on to the site plan here. Okay. The former storage garage was located approximately right here. In its place, the applicant is proposing to construct a 24 by 24 foot garage on what will become the new church property. That buildings can be used for lawn equipment, snow blowers, that sort of thing related to the site. And then in addition, on the school property, the applicant's proposing to construct 2 garages. One will be a 24 by 40, wait, I'm sorry. Bear with me. Okay, I'm sorry. One garage here is a 96 foot by 48 foot 16 stall structure. And then to the south of that, a 120 foot by 24 foot 10 stall structure. These will be used for the tenants of the proposed school building. Okay, with the land division, with the new proposed lot line going through more or less along the parking area, the drive areas, an additional base standard modification will be required for a 0 foot setback at the paved areas. This can be alleviated or enhanced, I guess you could say, with a creation of a cross-access and shared parking agreement with both new lots. I'm going to be talking about parking requirements in a few minutes and explain why the shared parking agreement will be required. In addition, go back to the air photo here. Currently along Boyd Street, the off-street parking area has a 0 foot setback up to the property line and butts right up to the public sidewalk. With the new construction, they're proposing to remove a 3 foot strip along Boyd Street, which will be replaced with grass and landscaping. However, when it was a legal non-conforming parking area, once that's removed, it loses its non-conforming status. Parking areas are considered an accessory use, and they're allowed to be placed within setbacks up to the front plane of the principal structures. However, the proposed new parking area does encroach closer to the street than the school building, so a base standard modification will be required for that reduced setback. I believe the school is approximately 4 to 4.5 feet from the sidewalk, whereas the proposed parking area is 3 feet, so it's a minor request they're seeking. Access to the parking lot. Back to the photo for this, you can see them better. Currently, there are 3 driveway accesses to the site along Monroe Street, 2 accessing the parking area on the south side of the property, and then 1 additional one which accesses the garage that's attached to the parsonage. They also have 1 access off of Merritt Avenue, which accesses the northern parking lot. And then they have 2 along Boyd Street, which accesses the main parking lot to the south. With the proposal or the proposed changes, they're looking to remove one of the driveways off of Boyd Street, and then replace it with a new access to access the parking area for the proposed apartment building. Parking for the proposed apartments consists of 9 surface stalls located along here just south of a green area, and then 26 garage stalls, which I talked about previously. Per code, a minimum of 2 spaces per living room is per living unit is required, which would total 70 stalls. However, the proposal is only showing 35 stalls, which is which is a shortage of 50%. Staff is supportive of a base standard modification for the reduced parking as the makeup of the targeted residents for the apartment buildings generally have fewer vehicles. And then the shortfall can be made up from available parking on a church property. The church sees limited peak usage, so there should be parking available most of the time for residents if it's needed. That's where the cross-access and shared parking agreement condition will be used to satisfy this concern. Also, go back to the photo. Sorry, I'm jumping back and forth here. There is angled off-street or off-site parking available along Boyd Street and Monroe Street. This is angled parking. I believe there's 9 located on Boyd Street and 10 on Monroe Street. And those spaces should have enough capacity to serve visitors to the apartment residents. Parking for the church. Go back, oops, to this one. With the new configuration on the church property, 65 surface stalls are being proposed, which includes 8 handicap accessible stalls. Based on the seating capacity of the church, which is 277 seats, 55 parking stalls are required, so they are over-parked. No pavement is being proposed to be removed along Monroe Street here. Right, again, it's similar to Boyd Street. The off-street parking does abut up to the public sidewalk. Staff doesn't have any concerns with no removal of the pavement along Monroe Street, as it currently meets code. Plus, we did have concerns that if they remove pavement over here, this would reduce the number of available stalls to be used by both the church and the apartment building. Okay, I'm going to talk about the apartment building now. Most of the existing schools building footprint is going to remain intact, with the exception of a proposed 606-foot square vestibule entrance and mechanical room area, which is located in almost what you can call a courtyard on the west side of the building there. Area is not generally visible from the street on the west side of the building. The applicant states that an existing boiler room and main stairway will be replaced with an ADA-compliant elevator near the new entrance. The boiler room was an add-on addition after the construction of the main school and is not an integral part of the original architecture. The site plan also includes a dumpster location located south of the school building. Its location is close to public right-of-way at only 9.5 feet from the right-of-way line. However, it is in a code-compliant location, and it is located behind the principal structure's the principal structure's front plane. To mitigate this impact on the landscape plan, which I'll be showing you shortly, they do include more intensive landscaping along the side of the enclosure facing Boyd Street. Details for the enclosure have not been provided, so design and materials shall meet minimum code requirements and will be reviewed during site plan review. So overall, when completed, there will be an overall reduction of impervious surfaces on both properties. In its current state, about approximately 83.2% of the site is covered by impervious structures or surfaces. And then as proposed, the overall imperviousness drops to 71.4%. So in square foot numbers, it's a 13,500 square foot reduction. The site still exceeds the 60% maximum coverage allowed by code. However, the project does decrease this coverage somewhat significantly. Stormwater management plans have been submitted. The initial comments from the Department of Public Works state that the proposed scope of work exceeds 20,000 square feet in disturbed area, so water quality will be required along with our other Chapter 14 stormwater management requirements. And final stormwater management plans will be required as part of the site plan review process. Okay, moving along to landscaping. This is the landscape plan that was provided, which includes a variety of trees and shrubs. The plan includes all the calculations for paved area, street frontage, yard, and buffer yard landscape point requirements. However, absent in the table is foundation plantings. However, they do show the foundation plantings along this side of the garage and this side of this garage down here. And the numbers do appear to meet what would be required. And staff thinks that it was just an oversight that the calculations were not included in the landscape table. One thing missing is landscaping for the proposed garage on a church property. So as a condition, staff is going to be requiring landscaping for the garage on a church property and include final calculations for planting and information for the structure. This is the proposed lighting plan. A number of wall sconces are being proposed. I'm going to talk about two that are located on Boyd Street. There are two entrances on Boyd Street. The light levels at the property line do exceed the 0-foot candle maximum at the property line. However, due to the close proximity of the building to the street, it's difficult to cut down that light trespass off the property. And with it being an entrance to the building, staff wants to keep safety in mind and does recommend a space standard modification to allow the increased illumination. The plans show a 2.7-foot candle maximum for the entrance, so staff is comfortable with that base standard modification. I'm going to jump to a close-up of the lighting plan. Internal site illumination for the parking area mostly meets code, but a lot of area, there's a minimum of 0.4-foot candles in the parking area, and most of it does meet code. However, the light levels indicated on the church shows a lot of zeros. Staff's not sure if they did not include lighting that emanates from the church property or if there's just no lighting there. Staff does have concerns with the lack of lighting in this area, as pedestrians will be utilizing this to access the trash enclosure, which is located down here. And the low light levels is a little disconcerting, so staff is requiring that the lighting plan be expanded to cover the church property and get those light levels up to provide lighting safety for pedestrians at night. Signage, sign plans have not been submitted at this time, so any signage, proposed signage shall meet base code standards and will be reviewed during site plan review. The building facades, the applicant states they are coordinating with the State of Wisconsin Historical Society. I believe they're seeking historic tax credits, and they're intending to maintain the exterior facades of the historic school building. This is a eagle view of the site. The school is located on the bottom here, and this is the church, of course. These are street views of the school building. The applicant states that numerous windows have been insulated and boarded up over the years, and it's their intent that the windows will be restored to match the current wood framed windows that haven't been boarded up, so that's a very, very good positive. And then any other exterior changes required will be directed towards the rear side or the west side of the building, which will be hidden from public view. The garages are all similar in design with vinyl siding and asphaltic shingles. The siding will match the color of the school's buildings brick with complementary colored shingles. The materials for the garages do meet minimum code requirements. However, in looking at the site plan, I'll go back to the site plan here. Although not required by base code, staff feels the garages should include architectural enhancements complementing the church and school's historic character. Staff suggests adding masonry knee walls along the sides of the garages and the fronts of the garages. The masonry material should match or mimic the look of the brick of the school and church buildings. We feel this isn't an unreasonable request due to the close proximity of the garages to the street and due to the number of base standard modifications being requested by the applicant. So we are adding that condition that they include some type of knee wall along, one more, here we go, along the fronts and the sides of the garages. So with that, sorry I was a little long-winded on that one, but staff is recommending approval of the zone change to add the plan development overlay, as well as the general development plan and specific implementation plan as requested, with a number of conditions and base standard modifications. I'll go through them quickly. Base standard modification for the proposed multifamily use within the institutional district. Certified survey map required for the reconfiguration of the two parcels. Base standard modification for a 0-foot side yard setback from the former school building where the new lot line is going to be. Base standard modification for a 50% reduction in off-street parking requirements from 70 to 35 stalls for the proposed senior living use. A cross-access and shared parking agreement between both properties. Landscape plan shall include foundation planting calcs for the proposed school, senior living redevelopment. Landscaping is being required for the new proposed garage on the church property. Base standard modification to allow a maximum of 2.7-foot candles along Boyd Street for that entrance into the proposed apartment building. A lighting plan to expand into the church property to get those light levels up for pedestrians using or living within the apartments. And lastly, adding masonry knee walls to the proposed garages.
All right, thank you, sir. Technical questions, John?
Could we go back to the elevations for the garage that you guys had, because we didn't have anything in here on that? I was just wondering, because you're asking for them to put the knee wall on the front and the sides, and I was wondering, there's really not much room that it's going to make much of an impact as far as the front, because it's very broken up with the doors already. Wouldn't you want it on the sides and the back, where it's going to be an empty wall?
So when we
Go
were
back to the site plan here.
yeah, when we were looking at it from an architectural standpoint and talking with some of our staff, felt it would be a little bit more of a consistent look. I know, especially when in new home development, you have that small knee wall between your double door and your single door.
Mm-hmm.
We felt that would give a nice consistent look as you wrapped around the building. The rear of the building, so obviously the two garages are back to back.
Right.
The southern one is heavily landscaped because we have a buffer yard there. So what
Okay.
we felt maybe it wasn't as necessary on that, but you could easily convince me that we should ask for that on the south as well.
Well, I was, but usually the knee wall thing, there's going to be so little room between those doors, and that's why I was thinking on the front part, it's almost overkill on that part. I don't know, maybe the petitioner or the architect will have something to say about that when they come up, but
Far.
just something I thought when I was going through it after actually seeing it up here.
Other technical questions, Lori?
Two. One relates to the dumpster enclosure and garbage disposing. I guess given that this is anticipated to be a senior facility, I guess my question is whether or not there was any thought or discussion around the advisability of having garbage receptacles or chutes or something for disposing without having to go out, especially I'm thinking, in winter and that with 55 plus, perhaps
I think that's-
dumpster enclosure might be somewhat problematic.
I think it's definitely a question to ask the applicant if they have any internal considerations for that. I know with some of the historic tax credits that can get a little tricky, but
And then along.
staff was looking at more of we still need somewhere for ultimately to be deposited so it can be picked up.
Sure. And then along those lines, somewhat tangential is accessibility in terms of automated doors or other universal design type features.
Yep, I know architects here, so we'll definitely ask them. I think they're very valid questions.
All right, go ahead, Justin, and then Tom.
So this may not be something specific for today, so it's not, doesn't need to be a change or anything, but just as we're doing that kind of whole block and looking at it, and the plan talks about a TIF, I know we don't necessarily do traffic, but I should just note that if you have, I don't know, 35 to 70 new elderly folks moving in across the street from another 150 to 200 elderly folks at Marion Manor, that's a good population, a senior population, and children and senior populations tend to be a little bit slower, not always, but in general, and a concern for traffic. The Merritt is a kind of skinnier road that is relatively decent trafficked, and it's really, I go on that 15 to 20 times a day, working across the street, and it's extremely hard to see. That intersection of Monroe and Merritt, and then Boyd and Merritt, is super difficult, and so it's just a recommendation, I guess, for when we're looking at this whole kind of block, is the setbacks from the curb for allowing parking on Merritt. I don't know what the normal setbacks are, if they're 10 feet or something to that degree, but it's really, really difficult to see. And by adding additional population to that area, I strongly recommend 25 feet, something sizable so that it's improves the visibility.
Okay.
So this is a 55 and older, not an age in place, correct?
I believe 55 and older, but we can verify that with the applicant.
Okay, and so the concern that I have is the parking spaces, because when you're getting to 55 and older, you're now out of baby boomers, you're getting into Gen Xers, and Gen Xers, we don't give up our cars. And so people moving into apartments, if they're couples, they will come with 2 cars. Baby boomers have 1. And so I'm thinking that the thought process in the reduction of parking spaces is somewhat flawed based on the generational differences between the two. The second is the side angle parking. Is that allowed to be overnight?
That is street parking, so that could not be counted towards this development, have to follow the typical city parking standard
So
rules.
there's no overnight between 2 and 4. So
That's-
somebody can't park there permanently.
Yeah, that's why we looked at making sure there's some agreements between the two parties, that obviously the church owns it, would be selling the property to the developer, of making sure that overflow parking is there. These are always tricky situations. Every time we get into multifamily development in an urban setting, parking always seems to be one of the largest considerations.
Right.
And a lot of times we look to the applicant to provide some information of what they typically see for a parking load based on their use. This applicant feels that based on the similar developments they've done at other places, this would support their need. They also feel they can regulate it a little bit through their structure of saying that you are provided 1 spot only. Staff had the same initial concern of are we getting to that point where 1-to-1 is maybe not enough? At the same time, we are in an urban setting, and parking in general is always one of those issues we have in urban settings. We have a school, there's a potential reuse for it. How do we balance the parking versus good reuse of a building? It's always a difficult decision.
Right, and if this was, 65 and older, it's all baby boomers, you really are pretty close to the 1-to-1, 1 car for each unit. However, because you are getting into the Gen Xers, and there is a significant difference between the two populations don't even like each other, quite frankly. But they come with cars, and any apartment that would host 2 people would likely have 2 cars. And so the concern is the parking for me, only because a parking agreement is only as good as the other property exists. If there's a redevelopment of that church for some reason, not saying that churches fail, but they do fail, there's a redevelopment of that property, then all of a sudden there may not be the parking spaces available, and so that's a concern for me. The final is the 2.7 candle lights at the entrances. Is that bright enough? As we get older, the cones in our eyes need more light. Is it bright enough?
It's significantly more than we require. So the code requirement for a entrance of that nature is 0.4. So we're 7, if my math works out, about 7 times brighter than that. And the actual base standard modification is related that it's significantly brighter than we allow. In this case, however, we're lighting the public right away, generally working with the streets department of public works. If people want to help light our right away for us, we're going to be okay with it. If we were adjacent to another property, obviously we would have great concern with light trespass. In this case, with taking safety into concern, making sure they're adequately lit, the fact that that spillover is in the right of way is where staff kind of was okay with in this instance.
All right. Other technical questions, folks? Go ahead, Kat.
I'm interested in the traffic circulation on the property, and it's not totally clear to me. And also the, who's parking? Are those interior spaces off of Merritt?
Those are
Yeah,
on,
right there.
that would be on the church's property. Those are the 60, I think they count towards the 65 of the
technically
church. Yep.
Church parking, because I see parking creep. If I were a member of that church, I'd be concerned about the parking that's left for the church. So I'll just say that. And but so people can access that interior parking from Merritt, and then there's enough room to back out and go back out onto Merritt. There's no south
No, you cannot.
egress.
No, you can't access through here. That
Okay,
it's
that's-
more of a
that's a
pedestrian
pedestrian.
path. Hmm.
Okay, and what is that gray, is that a pull-in
Yes, up here. This is a
right
drop-off
there?
area.
A gray
Mhm.
area for pull-in to
Residents.
the apartments, and then there's
Enter
like
here.
a few spaces on the apartment side. Those are apartment
Nope,
spaces?
those are for the church as well.
Yep, this red line is the proposed lot line.
Oh,
So all of these spaces would be on the church property. All the apartment parking spots are south of the
okay,
school.
so the only people access, drop-off, there's a drop-off there for apartment folks. There's a
Correct.
main entrance
Correct.
there.
Mhm.
Yep.
Is that the main entrance?
I believe so. This is where, in their narrative stated, new
That's where the
vestibule
elevator
and
would be
elevator.
added.
Okay. So then someone dropping someone off has to go back out onto Merritt, go back down Boyd, and perhaps park in a surface lot or park in their garage.
I would anticipate similar to most multifamily developments, they would have an assigned garage or parking stall for their
Okay,
their
but
vehicle.
that's,
Or drive down
I'm
the sidewalk?
supportive of this kind of reuse. I think it makes real sense, but there seem to be a lot of
City living.
nitty-gritty issues.
City
Yeah.
living.
The
That's
urban
right.
development.
And I'm less concerned about the few parking spaces for tenants, because they're gonna know this. And if they have 2 cars, they're not gonna be renting this unit.
Right.
They don't have they'll have 1 spot. So those people will go elsewhere, I think.
Laura?
Right now, that's
I'm
all
sorry.
I've got.
Go ahead, Lori.
Is there enough room to park, not tandem, but in front of the tenant's garage space and still allow for other vehicles to go in and out?
No. With it
That's only
being,
30 feet.
it's 30 feet and I think 28. You need a minimum of 24 feet for two-way traffic, and then generally a parking stall is approximately another 20 feet, so you need about 44 to be able to park a vehicle and still have sufficient room for two-way traffic. So in this case, it's just drive aisle. There would not be parking in front of those garages.
Okay. Any other technical questions? If not, I'd like to open the public hearing, and the applicant is here. We'd love to hear from you.
Andy Dumke, 2062 Menominee Drive. So the church's plan actually is to demo the building. And so we're here to try and solve two issues. Is one, keep a cool old historic building in place and redo it, and the second one is to provide some affordable housing in the community. I forgot the list of questions already, but I think one of them was there are 2 parking stalls around that circular drive for drop-off that they're going to give us an easement to.
Oh, there are, okay.
Yep, so
Okay.
we're going to have an easement on 2 of the stalls to the north of that circular drive. Mayor, I can't remember what your questions were. Oh, the dumpster enclosure?
Yeah, regarding other alternatives for.
So, typically we do try and do in the building chutes and garbage dumpsters. In this scenario, we can't figure out a way to make it work. And then if there's an exterior dumpster enclosure, we typically move them as far away from the building as possible. So it'd be all the way on probably the south corner is where we'd normally do it. In this scenario, we found the best place we could put it, although it's not ideal because you don't typically want them close to the building for smell purposes and everything else. We put it in that location because there are 2 doors on the east side on Boyd that tenants could use to take their garbage to the dumpsters, as well as it's, a little proximity to the front of the building. And then as far as parking requirements, we build a lot of senior housing throughout the state. And but 2 good examples are the 2 that we did in Oshkosh, which were Rivers 1 and Rivers 2. And the most recent one, Rivers 2, I believe we have 32 parking stalls underneath the building. And there's 40 units there. And if you drive past that building any day of the week, you'll see maybe 1 or 2 cars parked in front of the building. And generally that's for visitors that are using those stalls. So we feel very comfortable with 1 park per unit and then a couple extra for visitors. So,
Are these going to elderly at 62 and older, or near elderly at 55 and older? What's the?
well, we don't get to set the age. So it's 55 and older,
Okay.
independent living. In our experience with these similar projects, most people that are 55 are still working and they're not going to live here. So there's a bit of an older, most people are over 65 probably even.
Are they planned to be accessible housing then?
Every unit is visible and accessible, so every unit is handicap accessible. And we have certain units that actually have roll-in showers, and so we do a certain amount of units that are fully handicapped. So you could, the lower countertops and roll-in showers, but every single unit itself can be accessed by wheelchair.
Nice. Are you planning then on like 1 bedroom or 1 and 2 bedroom? What's the?
We are doing 19 2-bedrooms and 16 1-bedrooms is our plan.
I just want to say I appreciate the fact that you're decreasing the amount of impervious surface. While it's not the full, it's still an appropriate decrease in what you have to work with.
I would also, to back up what Mayor Palmieri said, it takes courage to do projects like this. As cool as it is for outsiders to look at an old building, and when you actually get down to actually trying to make things work like garbage, it's really tough.
Yep.
So I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Other questions for Mr. Dumpke?
I just make a comment again, similar. We've been kind of looking at that building. The shell of it is beautiful and great. And so, for the last couple of years, talking about how that could possibly be transitioned into housing. So, really excited that you're doing that. Great that you're looking to do the presumably historic tax credit application and preserve some of those features. As you probably know. Lack of accessible housing is considered by the community development assessment for the city for fair housing impediments as the #1 barrier to people accessing housing, and so that's great that you're going to be looking to expand accessible housing features. So really excited for that project. It will be a great asset to the neighborhood.
Any other questions for Mr. Dumpke or comments? Go ahead, Kathy.
Do you have problems with the suggestion about knee walls or
Nope.
architectural
No,
enhancements?
I'm good with all the suggestions, so, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Dumpke. Anyone else here to speak to this item today? Come on up. State your name and address and tell us what you think.
My name is Cheryl Jacklin, and I have the property, my husband Jerry will be coming up, abutting in back of the church's parking lot. I have 2 lots I recently purchased, my husband and I, and we have it to the corner we own on Washington Street. So it's us and the church on Monroe Street. Now, I have 2 sets of things going on. I have one set of questions about the church, and I have another set from the neighbors. We have some neighbors that were able to attend, and others couldn't attend for working or various different reasons. And my husband's walked the neighborhood, and I made the phone calls to get their questions and what they, would like to see on the site or questions about. And I kind of represent that and that. So my first questions, and I don't know if there's a representation here from the church, St. Mary's Church, because I have some couple of issues here with the church about what they plan to do, and questions, more or less.
It's not really part of this.
The garages.
Is there anyone from the church here?
Okay. Well, the first one is that my property is those 2 empty lots there. There's a blue enclosed bottom there. It'd be the south, yes. Those are mine, which we recently purchased. And the intention was, in the near future, within a couple years, to build a 1-level retirement home for my husband and I on both those lots to match the neighborhood, for our convenience. And the second thing is I built 135, 40-foot fence across that parking lot of St. Mary's to the end of our property there. And on that fence, we had a custom built, because the rest of that property is 6-foot fence line, enclosing it in, those 2 lots. And on that wall, I didn't want it appear to be institutionalized. It was too long. So I had a custom fence built that was 4 feet cedar on the bottom, 2 feet of lattice on the top, which you cannot buy. The lattice had to be custom made, and that's like 135, 40 feet. And in the meantime, I planted this spring clematis vines along my side of the fence that a couple more years will be going over the fence, so it's loaded with flowers throughout the summer of different colors. So St. Mary's on this proposal, which I didn't know at the time, I put the effort into decorating and softening up that fence line, have proposed a garage in that back corner in front of my property line, where it said it was going to be storage, and then the second thing I found out, when my husband got the big plan, it's a garage, 24 by 24 feet. Now, it takes up 4 panels, which is 8 foot wide in that corner, and I guess 14 feet high. Well, our house was going in that area. So, and the other reason I put the lattice work in, so we can view the shrine. Now, nobody has mentioned that Catholic shrine there, but the Blessed Virgin statue and the 2 angels. Whether the church is going to keep that or remove that, that's a big concern. A couple of the neighbors mentioned that they like that and consider that's historic, they went with the church, if that's going to stay there or not. And the other question was about what's going to happen to that priest house, which has been empty for a few years now. Why are they going to do that? Well, my concern is with that garage, I think they should put it someplace else. Number one, on the property they're selling, there's all garages there. And then the church building right there, as opposed to some other place on their property, is going to affect the airflow, which I opened that fence up to have more airflow, and the light. And with the garages there on the other side, just the appearance of the whole thing. And plus my house building there, I'll be looking at the back of the garage, which I'm not happy with. And so I think, that's why I was hoping the church would be here so they could address my questions here. Because of that garage greatly concerns me, that one. And if it's only for storage, why it had to be that big in the first place? 24 feet.
Excuse me
Okay.
1 second. I'm Jerry Jacklin, her husband. I live at 408 Monroe Street. Could you just point out that storage building she is referring to, please? Yeah, okay, good.
That's faces the back of our fence line.
Yeah, about 18 feet from your property line.
Yes, and that. All right, now, those are my concerns with the church. And I don't know if I have to call Deacon Rick or whatever to find out. If they're planning, because of a secular apartment building, they have already taken off 2 crosses off the top of the roof of that at school. 2 of them. One's on a cornucopia that's on the school building, which is real attractive, with a cross on top of that. And the other one is from the gymnasium facing Boyd Street. There was a concrete big cross on the roof line. Those have been taken out. I take it the church took those off. And so those were my issues. Mainly is that storage unit / garage, if that could be located by the church someplace else, because I also paid to take the telephone pole off. I removed the telephone pole from from Monroe and Washington, and I'm waiting and paid for the pole to be moved along that fence line. And everything's moved, we personally paid for that to make the aesthetics better in the neighborhood. We are planning on staying in this neighborhood, we love it, and plus it's on the upswing with the Howard investing, the YMCA, and several of the residents around the area have upgraded their homes and everything. And there's new streets down Washington Street, down Monroe Street, just finished Boyd Street. So the neighborhood, which is really starting to deter, is on the upswing. So that's one of the concerns of the neighborhood. The neighborhood we talked to and visited with, they're concerned about, number one, first of all, I want to know, we printed out some stuff just for you to glance over here. This is pictures of, yes, here's pictures first of the garages they built in back of the Washington Street apartment house. You can pass them around, they've got copies to that. And they're absolutely modern, do not match the building at all. Now, that's what a modern garage would look like.
That's the back of the front.
Yes, my husband, you can pass those out. And the second items I have is what I got out of the newspaper, the Northwestern and the Herald, comparing the Smith School with this outfit, because it's the same contractors. Well, it said the Smith School was applying to turn that on, put the school on the historical register so they could get grants to help build it. And I was wondering if the developers are going to try to put this on the historical register. So here is just the magazine articles you can pass, 3-4 copies of each on that. And the other thing, my big question is, before I get into the neighborhood, is this senior citizen or is this senior citizen low income? In the newspaper, it said low income, but I'm not hearing that word here, so I don't know which it is supposed to be. And I'd like to know that fact. And then there is the Marion Manor across the street, which is senior apartments also, and that. So we're talking to the neighborhoods. The main concern, they were real concerned of how do you fit 35 apartments in that building, adding the degree of volume of people to the neighborhood. Then they were concerned about those garages, whether they follow the architectural design of the city or are they going to look like that, which I'm learning more information as I sat here and listened, which I did not know before. And then there's a landscaping of it, which I believe is going to be addressed too by the city to upgrade it, to put the trees in, because the neighborhood is soft. It's on the upgrade. It's a neighborhood. We're trying to keep it a nice neighborhood friendly. That's what the city wants. So we need trees and softening so this doesn't look like an institution, no matter how it's remodeled. So that needs a lot landscaping with the garages and everything to blend. And then the other thing was lighting on the garages, the whole area there. is that gonna be like super bright, for the rest of the neighborhood surrounding it? Because they need to have light around it, and what is the degree of lighting that's gonna go in there? And there's also 2 telephone poles in the church part that does the lighting for the whole area right now, and I don't know if that's gonna be removed, those 2 big lights, like city lighting, that are in there on the church's side. And then, the blending in the neighborhood, if you mentioned the shrine too, that they wanted the shrine to stay there, and because it's part of the building and that. And then, that was basically the concerns. They believe that should be on the historical register. They believe that that should be restored as best as possible. The garage and the landscaping should be softened somehow to blend it in the neighborhood, because if you look at it now, you've got a blacktop parking lot with all the spaces for the church. You turn around and now you've got major garages there. So we don't want that looking like a storage unit. It's awful hard, like maybe there should be some plantings between the church parking lot and the garages to kind of soften this whole effect, to blend in, because everybody's planting flowers and, it looks pretty nice. Boyd Street too. And that, like, one house is torn out on Boyd Street, the neighbor bought it to have their lot bigger, rather than to, leave it. And that, so the neighbors are really trying to upgrade this whole area, combining efforts. And so, my thing is, are they gonna try to put it on the historical register? And also, the windows of the school. They had the beautiful old archway windows, because I attended that school. And I think that, and that's a lot of the neighbors too, that the windows should be restored. We don't know for sure what they're talking about here, about insulation ones or whatever, but we would like to see, the tonal windows back put in, the original windows, and that would go with the historical planning, of the building. And that, because when this first came around, because we were dealing with the church buying the lot first, we were under the impression it was going to be high-end apartments going in there, and this historical, build it back to, bring it back to square one, code-wise, everything, and that. And now it's changed. And then also, see the landscaping, the trees between the garages and private property, because that's going to cut off a lot of air with those garages, going through, and if they're not landscaped with trees, not just shrubbery, more trees put between the church too, their parking lot softened up, the whole area of the parking and that. And the thing of it is that, like that new addition that's being put on the side between the church and the school where there's iffy parking there, I don't know if they considered putting it right on Merritt Street there. Coming in through Merritt, going to there's a front entrance of that school, which is really, really plain, and I don't know what they're planning to do with that to upgrade that. Then swing it over to Boyd Street instead of messing up that in between. And the other deal is there's a tavern right on the corner there of Boyd and Merritt, where all the parallel parking at night, maybe not all of it, is by the residents of the tavern. They're parking there all the time. And I'm not sure if this plan is going to leave enough parking, with that volume of apartments in it. I really don't, because when the church has a funeral, I live right there, I live here. I know what's going on with those 2 things there. Both of those parking lots, original ones, fill up on the side of the road down Merritt Street and sometimes by Marion Manor. Or if you've got big occasions, wedding at the church, or you've got Christmas, Easter, and they're concerned about that they would have enough parking there. And so this whole thing needs some serious consideration here. Not just bim, bang, thank you, man, it's okay. I think this really has to take in, because the city wants neighborhood friendly. And everything around this is really trying to evolve this neighborhood and bring it up to code, and boys and girls clubs there. Marion Manor's well pumped up. And so that really needs to be, taking a good relook at the plan or any alternatives, or is there enough parking, or how is this going to affect the streets around it that's trying really hard to upgrade this neighborhood? And if it turns out, I'd like to know about low income, because in neighborhoods, you would at least need, in an old neighborhood, it's hard to get high-end in there, apartments or homes, people to build homes. But you at least want to establish middle income and low, a mix to come into the neighborhood. Build and remodel their houses or be encouraged because it's close to downtown and the Howard and Wide and these beautiful facilities, the whole Washington Street going up there. And then that's
If I could
the
just ask
concern
a quick
thing.
clarification on that. So you mentioned that you thought Mary Manor was well kept up and
Yes, I did.
overall pretty good. So just to note that that is also affordable housing.
Okay,
What you
okay.
have a lot of times with
Okay.
elderly housing
Yeah.
is that a lot of the folks are receiving Social Security
Well, that's-
or
yes.
they're receiving some sort of minimum pension. So it doesn't necessarily
Mhm.
connotate to a derogatory thing.
No, I know
would
that by
imagine that it would
Marion
be
Manor.
affordable
and that.
housing. So.
But, yes, but another issue about that, the city needs to look at in general, and this affects you because you're the planning commission, it starts here. On the east side, you've got Court Tower. Go down Main Street, you've got Main View Apartments. Do on the diagonal here, you've got Main View Apartments. Then you can go down to Lake Shore, which is old-timers, that right there by the river and Bowen Street. Then you got Bell Vista, and then keep on going, and you've got North Point Rehabilitation Center, and then you've got the new rub company complex going up. This is all senior, whether it's low income or not. But it's kind of getting condensed all on the north side. And that's kind of a concern too, is that not spread out enough through the rest of the city. But if any more comes in, but the main thing is, you need to look at this whole situation to protect our neighborhood. Our neighbors
think
are
we-
concerned, they
I think we get it.
Okay.
Can we move
Okay.
on to
Yes,
Robbie?
all right. Well, thank you very much. I'm
Thank you.
sorry if I was,
Mhm.
I wanted to get all the points.
Sure.
She actually covered all the bases. I just want to stress the putting as much, and I know in listening to you, it sounds, I like the idea. We're just trying to tweak it. Yeah, and the neighborhood does too, but spend as much as you can on getting this right. And like, for example, if you do keep that storage shed there, the part facing, let's say all parts of it, all angles, sides of it, just, match it up to the church as much as possible. Costs a few more bucks, but it's really worth it. That's, you might, if I could interject this, have a few rebuttals or something from her talking, or?
We are gonna
Oh, good. Okay.
Let's just wait and we'll have you come up at the end, Andy.
Yep, they'll get one more chance.
I'm sorry
Thank you.
to interrupt. Over there in Manor, they have a gazebo out in front of the street and smoking. Now, I was wondering if they were considering a smoking area for these people, like a gazebo
They have a
in the
little
back or
gazebo.
something like that.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else here from the audience to speak to this item today? Seeing none, Mr. Dumpke, would you, oh, we got one, sorry.
Dennis Reedinger, 1434 Hazel. I'm with the general contractor for this project. I can't speak specifically for the church, but in the conversations that we've had with them, the statue area is very important to them. That will not be touched in any way, shape, or form. As far as the rectory, I don't know what their thoughts are on that.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Mr. Dumpke, you want to take a shot at?
And I apologize, I forgot some of the questions, but we are using historical tax credits, so we will be doing everything to the historic standards, which includes the windows. That's the biggest part of the historic program, is bringing it back, the windows back to the original look. So I'm assuming we'll be doing exactly what she was asking about, where there'll be rounded tops, and then in my conversations, the shrine is staying as well. I can't remember. And then doing the access off of Merritt Street, that would just be difficult because, there's really nowhere to pull up a car and have people park there temporarily. And so it just made sense for us for them to come in through the two buildings, do the little circle drive to get in and out. And was there anything else?
Do you have any other questions for him? Okay.
Well, I mean, I think we kind of covered the lighting in the landscape plan. I mean, I'm always open for suggestions. If you want to look at that closer and you want to tell us what you'd like to see, I'm a big proponent of landscaping, so, I always say I'm happy to it's a minor thing to make people happy, so, once you get a chance to look at it, you can get my contact information, we can discuss it, so.
John?
I think one of the big things that they had mentioned was restoring of the crosses on top of the building.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the situation is with that. I actually haven't had that.
The historic thing, that's why I brought it up.
I don't know. Yeah. I mean, if it's, the church took it down.
Yeah.
Do we have any other questions for the? Just one, after 15 years on this committee, I have to say, anytime that multifamily housing is proposed anywhere, it's a challenge. So hats off to any developer that faces these groups, because there's always issues, no matter what, no matter how hard you try. And no disrespect to the neighbors, because I do think their concerns are real, but it takes some thick skin. So thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else from us on this one?
I was just going to throw out really quick that it noted that it's still about 14,000 square foot short on the requirements if it met minimum standards for impervious surface. If you look at the the terraces on Boyd Street, they're giant. Great area for adding terrace trees. I know that's a Parks Department thing, so I guess either in informal recommendation or an attachment to this is that the property owner or community development work with Parks Board to see if it's possible to implement some trees on Boyd. You can look at that if you go a little bit south there. It's a really great size.
Yep.
I walk by there, I don't know, every other day, and I mean, there's certainly a lot of room, and so that's a good combat for lack of impervious surface. I don't know if that's good enough or if you wanted to do something more formal, but.
Two driveways.
Not really related to the
Yeah, we
site.
can't, it's one of those where it's something we can work on as staff,
Yeah,
because it's
that's
in the
what I thought.
public right away. It's good that I'm glad you pointed that out, to know we had some room there we can maybe work with.
Tom?
What is the minimum setback for the two-car garage to the property line?
So the
3
minimum-
feet.
10 feet.
3 feet.
3 feet. Yeah, accessory structure, basically that area, similar to if it was a residential use, could go 3 feet to that south property line, 18 feet. Staff looked at the garage and had some concerns with it as well. Looking at it, it's a residential style garage that right now, for example, is a single family sized lot. That 24 by 24 foot garage on the north side of the lot, if you were gonna build a house out in front of it, it would be perfectly blend into the neighborhood. So being residential style, 18 feet off, or closer to the north, we felt it does kind of meet the surrounding area. It shouldn't have a negative impact, because it would be no different than if a residence was built there with a detached garage.
Before we have any more further discussion, can we do the motion in a second first and then have a discussion? You have a motion to accept?
Oh.
Adopt the
Motion to adopt the findings and recommendation as stated in the staff report.
Second.
All right, now, more discussion. Anything else, Tom, did that answer your?
So the the two-car garage fits within I mean, if it was a lot, they could build it now without even coming to us, correct? And because it's on the church's lot, can we require landscaping behind it?
Through the plan development, we could. I'm just trying to look at the area, so it's going essentially here. We're requiring it on the west side because it is street facing. If Plan Commission wants to add some landscaping around the south side of it, that would be within your purview. From a planning standpoint, if it was a residential property, we wouldn't require that. If it was a residential property, we wouldn't even require it on the west side.
Other thoughts, discussion?
One
Go ahead,
other
Tom.
thing, would the plan commission be willing to work with the developer to suggest that plantings go behind that garage?
Or would the city be willing to? Would you guys be willing to work?
I'm happy to work with Andy on it.
He's been very flexible.
Sure.
Andy?
I have no problem landscaping back there.
Let's call the roll.
Carey,
Aye.
Mitchell,
Aye.
Gross,
Aye.
Crop,
Aye.
Kulabali,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Vince,
Aye.
Palmieri,
Aye.
Wojtek.
Aye.
Motion carried 9-0.
Moving on to something fun. Item number 4, bicycle and pedestrian master plan update. No site inspections are applicable on this one. We accept the staff report as part of the record. Alexa, on to you.
I know how many we're gonna lose.
Okay.
What is it?
Great. So this is a request for approval of the bicycle and pedestrian master plan. So the plan describes future goals and objectives for alternative modes of transportation for bike routes as well as pedestrian routes within the city of Oshkosh. So this plan was facilitated by the city of Oshkosh in partnership with the Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission. And also, they worked closely with the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee to update the plan. So this is a plan update, and it is based on the plan that was adopted in 2011 by Common Council. So the plan includes, the Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee recommended approval at their October meeting. And the plan is pretty similar to the original plan from 2011. It includes existing conditions, vision and goals, best facilities practices, as well as route recommendations. And then the appendices includes a series of maps, recommendations, counts, crashes. Those are 2 map examples showing our route recommendations and our existing implemented routes. Staff recommends approval of the plan update.
All right.
Just a couple of brief words on this. Now, this is a bit of a success story. We had a bike and pedestrian plan in place in 2011. The city has systematically made improvements and ticked off a lot of the recommendations that were on the map to the point where it's like, all right, let's start on the next set. We've done a great job implementing, making these changes. We can get on to that next set of recommendations. So Alexa, working with the Central Planning Commission, kind of took this to the next level. What is the next set of street network connectivity and pathway recommendations we can take to build off the success we've already had? So really commend her and East Central and the Bike and Pedestrian Committee for continuing to keep this in the forefront and take it to the next step.
A couple things I like. First of all, it specifically states in there that you guys were thinking of a typical bike rider. Anybody that spent time in downtown Minneapolis like I have, or Washington, D.C., have some very aggressive, ill-mannered bike riders who don't pay any attention to people or to cars or to the rules. And I really think you focused way back in 11 too when we looked at on the person that wants to ride their bike to school or to work, or a kid going to the quick trip to get something to eat. And I also like how you guys have systematically tried to avoid really main streets for some of the bike lanes. I know sometimes that's not possible, but I think that does make it safer. I mean, that's my perception. So I really appreciate what you guys have done there.
Just, Alexa, if you wouldn't mind, just maybe highlighting what some of the differences are from the 2011 plan.
Sure. So like specifically like the actual routes or more of the content?
More just what some of the highlights are that are different from the 2011 plan.
Yeah, sure. So if you've seen the previous plan from 2011, this is significantly reduced in size, just pure page numbers. We were working to make it more visual, more concise, so we added more charts like you see here. Like it's more like bullet points, images of exactly the examples of the types of facilities we're recommending. We added more color, we added more pictures, but that's just the visual stuff. We updated it because 2011 there was like a completely different world of bike recommendations and what was happening in the biking world. So we added those newer types of facilities that may not have even been widely accepted or even exist back in 2011. So we added those new types of facilities for pedestrians and bicycles. And you would see that in this chapter 5 section. What else did we add? So we kind of streamlined the way we do our actual maps. A lot of the routes did stay the same. We didn't change that much, but The main difference between the way we do it now is if you see on the route recommendation one, like right here, you see there's a lot of red on that map. That the red is recommended, meaning that it's not implemented yet. The old plan recommended what type of facility it would be, like bike lanes versus just a sign or a Sharrow marking on the pavement. This is just red, meaning it'll be decided later.
Yeah, I want to point out that is a bit of a philosophy change that we took. The 2011, it made specific recommendation this route should have a Sharrow. As some of those routes got ticked off the list of actually being designed and implemented, we quickly learned the recommendation that maybe Bike and Pedestrian, the original plan made, wasn't feasible, and we had to alter it to, okay, we still want bike facilities on this road. What can this road actually handle? So maybe we went from a Sharrow to a bike lane, or from a bike lane to Sharrow, and we realized, well, instead of in the new map specifically saying this should be, let's just identify that this is a route we need to take care of. Once dollars are assigned for actually making that improvement, we can figure out what the most effective method is for that specific roadway, instead of kind of having to work backwards and saying, well, we said we wanted this, but what's realistic?
Because some roads may have to be completely improved.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's the main new updates. Besides that, we just updated our goals and objectives. I would argue that we made them a bit more specific. Like instead of saying like, oh, support bike events, we said specifically like support the Bike Osh event. Like we actually named more specific things. I think that's about it.
Thank you.
Go ahead,
So
Tom.
I just want to say that I'm fortunate to be on a city computer server, and so I get the notes and stuff of all of the commissions that come to me on a weekly basis, and this group has been so thorough in their work. It's pretty amazing to see really good people on the commission that I know a lot of them have dealt with this, and I think that this work has been amazing in really a short amount of time.
Anybody from the public here to speak to this today? Come on up, sir.
Jim Michelson, 1515 North Point Street, and I'm chairman of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee. I actually have been involved with the Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee. I actually worked on the 2011 plan for, I don't know, several years or whatever it took us. And actually, some of the people from the planning were on there, and it was a good committee. And so I've been involved with this ever since the start. And I'd like to talk about the update. Our committee has worked really hard for over 2 years, trying to work and really do a good job on doing a really nice job on the update. I think we ended up with a really good plan, and when I finally was reading some of the final things, I was amazed at actually how good it turned out, and really appreciate that. I'd like to thank all the people on the Bike and Ped Committee, and like you were saying, we really have a good group, and they're very thorough, and we've spent a lot of time, even going over just in detail on some of the routes, and spent a lot of time going over that and modernizing and updating the plan and that kind of thing. Special thanks to our committee, all their work and their input. Kim Bitterman from East Central Planning, she did a really good job. And Melissa before her, and Tanner Russell from the GIS with East Central really worked hard to really get these maps nice and did a good job. And especially Alexa, she was unbelievable in the work she did and putting this plan together. So, thank you.
Are you as happy as they are with what's gone on since 2011 in terms of ticking off some of the stuff on the list? Or?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. The plan's come along good, and we did a lot of nice updates in there.
Anybody have any questions for the gentleman? Because he's been key to this whole thing.
Thanks for your hard work.
Yeah, thank you.
2011 seems like such a long time ago. Kind of because it was. Anyone else here from the public to speak to this item today? Okay, back to us. We do need a motion to accept.
Motion to adopt the findings and recommendations as stated in the staff report.
Seconded. Any further discussion?
Yeah, just a couple
Go ahead,
things
Justin.
here. I just wanted to note that like this type of document is just beautiful and really makes living in Oshkosh an intriguing thing as the city moves towards a more bicycle-friendly, non-car-centered transportation system. So congrats, that's wonderful. The development of the bicycle lanes on Irving Street are amazing. We use them 5 times a week. I love that I can comfortably have my children ride to school, to Webster Stanley on Irving, and not have to worry about being on sidewalks and cars backing out and not seeing them. So it's certainly a great improvement. I know in 2011 some of the concerns were, well, there's not a lot of people biking, and why are we putting all of this time and energy? And one of the arguments that we made was that until some of the supporting infrastructure is in place, whether it be signs or actual lanes, you won't have people comfortably getting out and bicycling. And between the slow roll and whatnot, now you see just massive amounts of people bicycling, and one of those, if you build it, they will come sort of thing, and so that's beautiful to see. So congrats on all of those fronts. 2 quick questions. Is there a list anywhere of here's the next 5 years, here's the activities that we're looking at?
So every year, Bike and Pedestrian Committee puts out a set of recommendations to work towards. I believe the 2020 ones will be working on this spring for projects to be implemented in 2020. They kind of do it on a year-by-year basis. Sure.
Okay. And then I really appreciated the bicycle and trail crash map. I thought it was a really good data to look at. Are there any specific actions that are planned for? I mean, I see quite a few on Jackson, and I know that's a high-speed corridor. Murdoch, Witzel, and Ohio were kind of some consolidated crash and safety concerns. Is there?
The Jackson Street one is an easy answer. We're undertaking a Jackson Street corridor study presently, so that will be analyzed as part of that planning effort.
I know the original plan that was, because this was contracted out initially, a firm came and they had recommended Jackson back down to 2 lanes and super pedestrian corridor, and I'm assuming we're not going that route, but there's a lot, of concern there. And the other ones then, you got Murdoch, Witzel, Ohio. Is there anything in particular, I guess, that's being looked at for safety?
Off the top of my head, I can't think of one, mainly because we've been focusing so much on Jackson Street the last couple of months.
Sure, which is great.
But it's definitely, I think, as we move through this plan, similar to what they did in the 2011 plan, it's identifying the locations of the city that have the greatest need and starting to prioritize them as routes to consider and what changes can be made to update it.
I'll address that a little bit. Yeah, Jackson Street's been a big concern. I'm glad they're going to do the study. Our committee has tried to find, we've talked about many times the pedestrian aspect of trying to find some kind of safe crossing, because of the way the city grew, you had subdivisions where the streets don't line up between New York and Murdoch. And we've been looking for a number of years trying to find a safe passage where pedestrians can cross, in that area. And so that's why the study will be really good. But one of our big concerns, in fact, we had the DOT at our meeting for about an hour one time, kind of mostly grilling them. We still do not feel comfortable with the roundabout at Murdoch and Jackson.
If you can figure that out, you're getting a Nobel Prize.
Yeah. Well, we had the DOT, and we learned a lot, and there was a lot of things.
Driver, bicyclist,
yep, we just don't feel, and that's why if you look in there, we put the mark in there of an area that we would like to focus on. And one other area, and that will be developing with the whole new trail that's going to go between Oshkosh Truck and Rainbow Memorial Park and all that. And we all know, anybody who bikes, that the Oshkosh Ave and Sawyer Street intersection is a major area for bikes and pedestrians. We need a safe crossing when that's all done, because of all the linkages of all that happens through there. And those are a couple that come to mind that are really, really important that we're focused on. Yes.
Go ahead, Mamadou.
One thing is the infrastructure. Another thing is the information that the biker gets about the infrastructure and the safety. That is, the Bike Association has done for workshops or information sessions to deal with those hurdles.
Not sure if I.
There's some outreach, I think there's some outreach goals.
Yeah, no, no what I mean is the bike association, right, that you're the president?
Yeah, the Bike and Pedestrian Committee, yes.
Do they have some information sessions for
Like education?
Education, yes.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah,
workshops that can make it easier for the biker. Even if the infrastructures are there, that doesn't mean things are still easy. Like when we put the roundabout, there was a lot of accidents. So they need the connection between the people and the infrastructure. So is there a plan for that?
Alexa, why don't you
So
could
we
maybe-
have, they call it the 6 E's, and so it's like engineering, education. So education is one of the big goals within that. And so we have a series of objectives under education, things that we've already done. We had 2 roundabout safety days that we planned and organized and actually followed through with. We got a small group of people and we actually went out to the roundabouts on Witzel and 9th. And we actually walked, we had the police department there, they had their motorcycle people, and they were actually like giving warnings to people and even a ticket, I think, to one person.
It's an eye opener. I did it 2 or 3 times, and I tried to get our committee people to all be there if they could. Not all of them could make it, but if you try to walk those roundabouts on the Witzel and 9th, it'll open your eyes about pedestrian safety. I'll tell you that.
But the whole thing when you're a driver is you're trained to look left.
Yeah.
Well, but people are, it's crazy, but.
Yeah, so that was one of our efforts to help outreach to the public and educate users of all kinds. Our Bike Gosh event is also, the main purpose of it, besides just fun, is actually to educate users about the infrastructure that we do have for bikes and how to correctly use the bike routes. So it's an ongoing thing, like we're always trying to educate the public and users.
Yeah, Chapter 3 of this plan talks a lot about the education and outreach and things that the city undertakes. Police department even does some on their own. So one of the aspects of an effective plan is also the public outreach and informational.
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments from us before we vote? All right, let's call the roll meeting and see if we approve of this.
Harry.
Aye.
Mitchell.
Aye.
Gross.
Aye.
Rob.
Aye.
Coulibaly.
Aye.
Ford.
Aye.
Hints.
Aye.
Palmieri.
Aye.
Boykin.
Aye.
Motion carried 9-0.
All right, we have 2 workshops, so we need to adjourn this.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All's in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right.